David Fowler sat in the dimly lit corner booth of La Belle Étoile, an upscale Manhattan restaurant where crystal chandeliers gleamed and the clink of fine china filled the air. At 28, he was the picture of privilege, tall, polished, with sharp features softened by a tailored navy suit. As the only son of billionaire real estate mogul Richard Fowler, David's life was a carefully curated masterpiece of wealth, status, and opportunity. He scrolled through his phone, barely noticing the hum of conversation around him, when a shadow fell across his table. "David Fowler," a voice said, calm but unyielding. He looked up to see a black woman in her late 50s, her server's uniform crisp despite the long shift. Her name tag read Jasmine. Her dark eyes held a weight that made his casual smirk falter. "I'm your mother." David laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "You've got the wrong guy." "Nice try, though." He returned to his phone, assuming it was a bizarre prank. But Jasmine didn't move. Her gaze locked onto his, steady and piercing, carrying a truth he couldn't ignore. "I'm not joking, David. I'm your mother, and your father has kept the truth from you your entire life." The words hit like a punch to the chest. David's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. Confusion swirled in his mind, mingling with a flicker of dread. Could this be true? The restaurant's elegance faded into a blur as Jasmine's words echoed, pulling at the threads of his perfect life. "Where are you watching from?" a narrator's voice seemed to ask, as if this moment were a story unfolding for an audience. David's world, however, was no longer a performance, it was unraveling. Over the next few days, David couldn't shake Jasmine's claim. It clung to him like damp air, heavy and inescapable. His life had always been a portrait of perfection: private schools, a penthouse in Manhattan, vacations in the Hamptons. Richard Fowler, his father, was a towering figure, charismatic, commanding, and untouchable. But Richard had always been cagey about the past, brushing off questions about David's late mother with vague platitudes about her beauty and grace. David had grown up believing his mother died when he was a baby, a tragic but distant memory. Now, Jasmine's words threatened to rewrite everything. That afternoon, David drove to his father's sprawling Westchester estate, a mansion of glass and stone that screamed success. The study, lined with mahogany bookshelves and a massive desk, was Richard's sanctuary. David found him there, poring over contracts, his silver hair catching the light from a Tiffany lamp. "Dad, we need to talk," David said, his voice tight. Richard didn't look up, his pen scratching across paper. "What's on your mind, son?" David's hands clenched at his sides. "A woman named Jasmine. She says she's my mother." "Is that true?" Richard's pen froze. For a split second, his composed facade cracked, a flicker of tension in his jaw, a shadow in his eyes. Then he leaned back, exhaling. "I never wanted you to know about that, David." The air in the room thickened. David's pulse pounded in his ears. "What does that mean?" Richard met his son's gaze, his expression heavy with regret. "Jasmine and we were young. I was nobody then, just a kid with big dreams and no money. She was a waitress, working her way through community college. We had a fling, nothing serious. But then she got pregnant. My family, they didn't approve. They saw her as beneath us. When you were born, I wasn't ready to be a father. I was building my empire, and they convinced me you'd be better off with me, in a stable home." Jasmine agreed to step away. "I thought it was for the best." David's world tilted. "You thought lying to me was for the best? You told me my mother was dead." "I didn't want you caught in the mess of my past," Richard said, his voice low. "I gave you everything, David. The best schools, the best life. I made mistakes, but I did it to protect you." "Protect me?" David's voice cracked, anger surging. You stole my mother from me. You let me believe a lie my entire life. He stood, pacing the room, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The man he'd idolized, the father who'd shaped his world, now felt like a stranger. I need to know everything, Dad. No more secrets. Richard's shoulders sagged, the weight of decades evident in his posture. I'm sorry, son. I never meant for it to hurt you like this. David left the study that night with his foundation shattered. The life he'd known, built on wealth, status, and a carefully crafted image, was a lie. He couldn't sleep, haunted by the truth and the questions it raised. Who was he, really? And who was Jasmine, the woman who claimed to be his mother? The next morning, David arranged to meet Jasmine at a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from the glittering world of La Belle Étoile. The place was cozy, with mismatched chairs and the scent of fresh coffee. Jasmine arrived in a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back, her face etched with both strength and vulnerability. They sat across from each other, the hum of the cafe a stark contrast to the gravity of their conversation. So, it's true, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're my mother. Jasmine nodded, her eyes steady but soft. Yes, David. I didn't want to tell you like this, in the middle of a restaurant, but I've spent years trying to reach you. Your father's family, they made it impossible. They offered me money to disappear, told me you'd have a better life without me. I was young, alone, and I believed them. David's chest tightened. Why didn't you fight for me? I grew up thinking my life was perfect, but it was all a lie. My father, Richard, kept you from me. Jasmine's gaze dropped to her coffee cup, her fingers tracing the rim. I tried, David. I wrote letters, made calls, but I was a nobody going up against a powerful family. They threatened to ruin me, to make sure I'd never see you again if I didn't comply. I thought letting you go was the only way to give you a chance at a good life. But not a day went by that I didn't think of you, that I didn't love you. Her words hit David like a wave, raw and unfiltered. She wasn't angry or bitter, just honest, carrying the weight of a choice she'd made decades ago. He saw the pain in her eyes, the years of sacrifice etched into her face. I don't know how to process this, he admitted. My whole life, I thought I had everything. Now I don't even know who I am. Jasmine reached across the table, her hand warm against his. You don't have to figure it out all at once. I'm here now, David. We can take it one step at a time. For the first time, David felt a flicker of connection, not just to Jasmine but to a truth he'd been denied. His perfect life had been a facade, but this raw, messy truth, felt real. In the weeks that followed, David grappled with his fractured identity. He couldn't return to the ease of his old life, the dinners at his father's estate, the boardroom meetings where he played the role of the billionaire's heir. Every interaction with Richard was strained, heavy with unspoken resentment. One evening, David confronted him again, standing in the grand foyer of the Westchester mansion. You can't keep pretending this didn't happen, David said, his voice steady but sharp. You owe me the truth, all of it. Richard's face was drawn, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet remorse. I was wrong, David. I thought I was giving you a better life, but I took away your right to know your mother. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that. David wanted to stay angry, but he saw the man behind the empire, a flawed father who had made choices he couldn't undo. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, David said. But I want to try to rebuild something real. Richard nodded, his eyes glistening. I'll do whatever it takes, son. David also began spending more time with Jasmine. They met for coffee, took walks in Prospect Park, and slowly pieced together a relationship. She shared stories of her life, her childhood in Harlem, her dreams of becoming a teacher, the pain of giving up her son. David listened, learning about the woman who had loved him enough to let him go. One evening, over dinner at Jasmine's modest apartment, David looked at her and felt a warmth he hadn't known he was missing. "I never thought I'd be here, sitting with you," he said. "But I'm glad I am." Jasmine smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You've come a long way, David." In that moment, David realized he didn't need the perfection he'd been chasing his whole life. The truth had shattered his world, but it had also given him something real: Jasmine, a mother who loved him, and a chance to redefine himself. The pain of the past lingered, but it no longer defined him. He was building a new foundation, one rooted in truth, love, and the people who mattered most. Epilogue. Months later, David stood on a Brooklyn rooftop, watching the city skyline glow against the twilight. He was no longer just the billionaire's son. He was David, son of Jasmine, a man learning to navigate a life built on honesty rather than illusions. His relationship with Richard was still a work in progress, but they were talking, slowly rebuilding trust. With Jasmine, he found a quiet strength, a bond that grew stronger with every shared moment. The truth had been a storm, tearing down everything he thought he knew. But from the wreckage, David found peace, not in wealth or status, but in the messy, beautiful reality of his life. He was ready to move forward, one step at a time, with the truth as his guide.